I believe we are recording. Yes, it says we're recording. So I'm Richard Esplin with Evernym, and this is the Indy team, the Evernym Indy team that contributes to Indy Node and to Indy SDK. And this is the 15th sprint of 2018. We're going to go through the work we've been doing. The goal for this sprint, we're working to get the network stable enough that we can really pound it and scale this with public adoption. We have some external people who want to go live on this network in the next 60 days, and we need to support that. So this release has been focused on that effort, on proving stability and doing additional fixes necessary for us to be confident that this network is going to hold up under load. So today we're going to, and I did have the Agile board. So we have two teams that we have that worked on this. In Jira, the Indy project, the Hyperledger Jira, explains we cranked through a lot of story points this release. There's still a few stories in validation state, but the work is largely complete. And most of this is focused on, we got the 1.5 release out and a lot of bug fixes, a lot of cleanup, which has been really useful. On the SDK side, similarly, we got out the SDK 1.6 release and did a lot of cleanup as well. Retired a huge number of story points, even with the team assisting other Evernym teams, doing some continuous integration work and dealing with vacations. So really happy about the progress the team made. I think this might be our best sprint ever as far as story points. We got a lot done. And it's one of the highest sprints we've ever done in terms of total numbers from both teams. So fantastic, appreciate all that. Well, let's get to the demos. So we're gonna, Sergey's going to talk about the work done to understand the execution time, profile the code base so we have a better sense of how things go. Then we'll have Dmitry explain on the Indy Node side how the new upgrade process will work. The Sovereign Foundation is our first production deployment of the Indy code base, and they need to install, they have a payment system they've been working on, and we need to get that deployed to the Sovereign network. So we set up a system for that. And then we'll talk about the SDK. We did a bug fix on the last release. I want to talk about that, and then talk about how continuous delivery works on mobile platforms, which is really important for Evernym's product teams, the consumer products, and it consumes those mobile releases. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and let Sergey take over. Excellent. We're seeing your screen, Sergey. You're still on mute, though.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Oh, great. Great. Last sprint, well, in fact, this sprint, I was working on adding some metrics to Node so we can measure some important values like real average message size, amount of messages between nodes, so we can get some numbers about how much RAM we need to operate nodes in different circumstances. So I'll start by showing which metrics we are now collecting. So there are a number of them already, and we are going to increase these metrics in future. Now we just write them to RocksDB file, and this can be turned off, of course. So so if somebody don't like to write metrics and spend disk on that, they can turn it off, and this is by default. Right now, I was processing some metrics that I got from 25 node pool, and we've got a matrix processing sleep that outputs in files in comma separated values, and so we can just process them in something like Excel. On the first graph, you can see a number of client stack messages processed per second, and most of the load time it was about 10 messages per second, and we can see number of requests ordered per second, but this is on all replicas. So to get a real number, you need to divide it by 9 in this case. This was a load test when 10 clients were writing and 100 clients were reading. As you can see, there were just 10 incoming node messages, and besides that, read requests are spread across all nodes. Still, we see that they are not reaching 10 writes per second, but this is probably a problem with load sleep, which we were investigating with Vladimir just before the start of this demo. So, looking at this data, we can see that average loop, average time took by loop was just under 1/10 of second, and then after you change it changed to about half a second. And yes, there was a view change at this point of time. Hopefully you can see my mouse showing this moment. And we can see that average incoming node message size was about just half kilobyte, but then it increased to about 2.5 kilobytes, and node traffic was just about 200 kilobytes per second. There was also another run which was done yesterday, and here we can see that in some cases incoming node message size was as high as half megabyte. We are going to fix this as soon as possible, because with such message size we will need quite a lot of RAM. We are going to restrict this number by about 1,000 kilobytes, and in this case we will need with current queue length we will need about 60 gigabytes of RAM for node-to-node queues. And we are also looking further how to reduce this this amount by reducing number of messages in node queue. But currently it seems that node can eat a lot of RAM. So that's all. If you have any questions, you are free to ask them.
And so as a result, this day is going to be really good. We are working with the Sovereign Foundation to modify and update their requirements for stewards that are in consensus, for the nodes that are consensus, to reflect these load profiles. So having this real data will inform that conversation, so we can make that trade-off correctly. Nathan, do you have any questions before we move on?
Yeah, I was just going to ask where that conversation has started and how we expect that engagement to proceed.
I heard that there was a meeting scheduled, and Daniel said he'd raise this, and Trev said he'd raise this with that group. But honestly, I don't know all the details. I'm hoping you can help drive that.
Okay. And then the other question is, how does this relate to the throughput performance requirements that we've been discussing? Are we on track for the throughput requirements? Where do we think we're off? And have we learned something from this performance measurement that we think will help us to address that?
I think that we are on track because you can still see my screen, yes. Well, the results from yesterday's load testing is that we had 10 incoming client messages per second, probably a bit more at some times. And well, we can write 10 messages per 10 requests per second while reading 100, and for today's data it was just some problem with the load script. I think that in probably an hour we will have data when really 10 writing transactions and 100 reading are performed, and we will have metrics data on that. So I don't see any problems here.
Excellent. And did the measurements point to anything that we would like to change in the architecture or the code in order to make things better?
Well, I think that the most important thing that we will need to change is sizes of messages. Well, limits on sizes of messages. We will need to experiment with sizes of queues, and as for architecture, well, as for client stack, we think that we need to stop using zero MQ and use something like HTTP, but it won't be done right now, of course. And but this is, as far as I understand, is expected already.
Yeah, the main goal of this effort wasn't to identify the architectural changes we need at this time, but to create the instrumentation necessary for us to do further tests that will help us understand architectural changes needed. So we have some future tests coming up on larger pools, so we can see how those messages impact performance, and some load tests involving, well, and those we actually started that in this sprint, but we'll report on it in the next sprint. Reporting on the usage of the network under high levels of load. And so we wanted to make sure that we could get the information out of those tests that will lead to that. And so that's an effort for future sprints.
That sounds great. Thank you, Sergey.
Now we need to move on. We'll let Dmitry share his screen.
Okay. Do you see it? Okay. We started our work on extending our operate command to be able to upgrade not only Indy Node, but some top-level packages that has some dependent, that is dependent from Indy Node. The first step is to teach Indy Node to make a proper dependency list. We started by adding the name of top-level package in Indy Node config. The parameter is the parameter called upgrade entry. For Indy Node, it will be Indy Node. For sovereign packages, it will be sovereign. These tests create some package manager output that will allow us to test how our Indy Node handles this situation. We have some top-level packages that depends from Indy Node and two additional packages. These two additional packages depends one from Indy Node and one from Plenum. Let's see the result. Sorry, I didn't mean that it will be so long. Without debug, it runs much faster.
So Alex and I were, well, this runs, Alex and I were talking about the trade-offs between a configuration parameter versus the upgrade transaction pulling in the package name. Can you discuss a bit?
Okay, sorry, I will continue with the discussion, discussion. So this is the list, this is the order of packages to be upgraded that our node were able to calculate. As we can see, the first one, the first upgraded will be unknown creds, then Plenum, then Node, then our two plugins, and some top-level package that in future will be sovereign. So the first part of this work in the Node side is almost completed. All we have to do is to make a proper parameter, not proper, additional parameter to pull upgrade command. I hope to finish this work tomorrow, and I hope I will show you the working command on next demo. About additional parameters and trade-offs. To be able to validate the package we want to upgrade that were mentioned in node command, we need to compare it with something. And this something we need to have in config. But if we have it in config, probably we can skip those parameters from from pull upgrade command. But it will require some manual upgrade step when we will need to upgrade to the first version of Sovereign that support this functionality. So to avoid manual interaction, we decided to leave this parameter. To extend pull upgrade command with new parameter. So I will finish this tomorrow.
Yes, and just a quick comment that if this parameter in pull upgrade command is specified, then it will be used for upgrade. If it's skipped because it's optional, then the value from this config will be used. So it's either Indy Node or some other top-level package.
Yeah, and I also want to point out to anybody who watches recording that in the long term, we want as Indy Node stabilizes, we want the administrators, the stewards, to have more control over when they roll out upgrades instead of the current process by which we push them out in the upgrade transaction. And so this is a temporary fix. It's not the ideal solution, but it gets us through this immediate need. We'll probably use it for a few more upgrades, and then we want to move to a more controlled system where the ledger's upgraded piecemeal, and we support more than one protocol on the ledger at a time. So Nathan, any questions before we move on?
It sounds like there's an interesting discussion about where the package and upgrade command configuration is stored. It's yet to be had.
You mean whether it's on the ledger or in the config file?
Yeah.
Yeah, so both systems are supported. Doing it on the ledger saves stewards having to manually update their config files for the first rollout. But in the future, we'll have both options available for us to use as we see fit, as you see fit.
Okay.
Excellent. Next demo is Sergey.
Well, thank you, Richard. Let me share my screen. This sprint on SDK side was focused on mostly stability fixes and some enhancement. In the previous one sprint, we introduced efficient search for unclaimed entities, and in this sprint, it became unstable. The new stable version is 1.6.1. It has some minor bug fixes against 1.6.0. The next box of changes in this table is about network communication. There was some optimization in the previous sprint, and now it also became stable. And in this sprint, we also add configuration for pull connection. Now application can tune timeouts and nodes priority, and it allows to align behavior for specific use cases. The next bunch of stabilization was in payments API. In version 1.5, it was experimental. Now it's became stable, and it's more generic now. Actually, we support non-UTXO based payments in the 1.6 release. There are also major improvement to our CI and CD process, and starting from 1.6, we provide experimental Android builds. Also, in this script, in this sprint, but out of 1.6 release, we introduce CD pipeline for iOS, and Artem will share you more details about it. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Yeah, we're really proud of the 1.6 release. It's got lots of new features and lots of value. Thank you, Sergey. Nathan, you got a question before we move on?
No, I don't think so.
Excellent. So Artem.
Hello everyone. I would like to inform that we have updated our CD pipeline to run Xcode for App integration tests, and also to build and publish automatically packages for iOS platform. We used to publish and build these packages manually when it was necessary. Now, these packages will be published on every running on CD pipeline. Now we publishing two artifacts for two our libraries, libindy and libnulpy. For every of these libraries, there are two types of artifacts. First one contains universal binary artifact which built for 5 target architectures. This architectures platform can be found here. In second one, built for 2 first platforms. The same types we have and for libindy. For the current moment, we have only one master build which have been published from pipeline. Also, I would like to notice that we have merged pull request from SAMI. This pull request relates to publishing on Android artifacts. These packages can be found here. And for iOS, there are 2 packages for libindy and libnulpy. For Android, we already have different types of packages. We even have a stable version, master, NRC. That's it. Thank you.
Who owns the infrastructure that's doing the iOS and Android builds? Is that Evernym infrastructure or is it Hyperledger infrastructure?
Evernym infrastructure.
Okay, excellent. This is something we've needed to get done, and I'm glad to have it. So the next step is for us to work with the Sovereign Foundation. We recognize that we still host a number of the pipeline, a number of pieces of the pipeline that we need to move. We're going to work with the Sovereign team to move to Hyperledger infrastructure over time. It's great to see the work done. We also really appreciate the collaboration with Sammy and members of other Evernym teams on getting this done. And we've had a new Sergey joined our team to help with a lot of this. And Andre K, of course, does a lot of our CI/CD work. So thank you for that collaboration. It benefits the entire build process across all our products. Any questions, Nathan?
No, it looks like there's a lot of good things here to learn and to work on getting transferred over to the foundation.
Excellent, agreed. So thank you for those overviews. So the next sprint we're starting today is on the Indy Node side. We are going to continue our work towards a 1.6 release. Indy Node 1.6 is our goal of this is ready for pounding. And over the next 2 weeks, we have identified some specific tasks that need to happen, but we've also reserved a lot of room in this sprint to deal with bug fixes and do additional performance testing. So the sprint plan is fairly light. We're going to get together as a team and decide what that additional performance testing needs to be, and we're going to go through the backlog. There's a number of items near the top that we want to pull in to fix bugs and do polish and get this thing ready for widespread usage. The Indy's next sprint, we still have a number of the team on vacation, and we're still going to continue working to assist other teams with their CI/CD work. And so we're keeping this sprint a little lighter as well. We are working on the 1.7 release. We want to do some additional work around the Git Validator Info tool that's used to monitor the state of the network and do some final work that's been identified to get the code base ready to leave Hyperledger incubation. And then we'll start going through bug fixes and polish. Our goal is to have a 1.7 release in the next couple of weeks that represents really a high level polish and ready for widespread usage, so we can start advertising this and pushing it broadly over the next 60 days as people come onto the network. That's the plan, and that's our demo. Of course, if anybody has questions, you can reach out to us via email or Rocket Chat. We're on the Indy Rocket Chat. And Nathan, we appreciate you representing the global community in our calls and asking your questions. And let us know if you have any other questions.
Thanks, everybody. Look, there's a lot of good work going on.
Thank you.